to cement it. Stay with us on BBC World News.
Important client for Russia. They will have to look for another one, and certainly they will have to decrease the price.
We'll be getting reaction from Moscow and also speaking to a former Polish Prime Minister about the impact the deal.
Kids screaming, go in there, save those kids.
1 week after the school shooting in Texas, tennis star Sir Andy Murray, who survived the Dunblane massacre as a child, calls for changes to America's gun laws. Hello there and welcome to BBC World. By the end of the year. It's seen as the most significant set of sanctions hitting at Russia in response to its invasion of Ukraine. However, the EU's agreement includes exemptions for Hungary, which depend.
2/3 of Russian oil imports arrive in the EU by sea. That will be banned immediately. But there'll be a temporary exemption for pipeline oil because of objections by Hungary. It says negotiations for the EU to reach this compromise deal. Earlier sanction packages were agreed quickly, but the oil embargo has exposed divisions among European countries. EU leaders say they want to wean themselves off Russian funds for Russia's war effort there. Bethany Bell, BBC News, Brussels.
So how is the news of a ban on Russian oil being received in Moscow? Russia editor Steve Rosenberg says the Kremlin will have noticed that...
The position on this is, well, it's a big world out there, isn't it? We'll sell to other markets. We'll sell to Africa, to Asia. And even if Russia has to do that at a discount, it reckons that the high global oil price will help offset those losses. And one other thing, the Kremlin will have seen how difficult it was for EU member states to sit down and come to an agreement over this oil embargo. The Kremlin knows that there are differences of opinion in Europe on...
...made in this agreement. How much was lost? What do you make of it?
Well, a polite answer is it's a big step in the right direction. But as a former Solidarity in 1984, Margaret Thatcher said to Mr. Gorbachev, we can do business together. I think that the message to Putin, who is a war criminal, is simple. We can't do any more business. It would be the message, because I think for time being, he thinks that this is not a irreversible situation, that he can, as you said before in the program, that he can play the differences, to mention the ministers and maybe even one president. So he has good playbook for that.
Okay.
So we cannot do business with the war criminals.
There are a number of accusations in there.
Negotiated additional and new exemptions, and because landlocked country, they are exempted and they could buy effectively the Russian oil.
Need this oil to come from Russia. The EU does have options. It can reroute oil. Does Hungary, did it need this exemption?
Well, this is a good situation because there are different pipelines sent to him. Even though for this particular solution, let's forget about it.
Okay. Obviously, many people are saying all very well looking at Russian oil, but the big game changer is
because in order to blackmail in more efficient way, they were empty, and now they are saying that it's a business deal. Well, what a business deal? They play bloody politics. As a weapon. Okay. It's a weapon of the politics, of economic
Now, Poland has been asking, your country has been asking EU countries to step up and to do more to help use of Polish planes. There has been criticism of Germany's stance, for example, towards energy, and also this opposition to Poland supplying jets. What is your stance on the way Germany
project? Now they are going more and more in the right direction. I think for the Germans, it's particularly important to gain also this moral. Mrs. Merkel opened the borders and said to the immigrants, welcome, welcome, because she looked for the upper hand, the moral upper hand, saying that, okay, we are not anymore.
They would make that point. But you have an economic background. You ran the second biggest bank in Poland. So I'd love very quickly your assessment on that. And also, how do you deal with Russia? You dealt with the then Soviet Union.
The Cold War is over. And then we learned quite recently that in London they had hundreds of spies under the diplomatic cover. So for them, you must understand that it's all fake. In fact, it's about the country where, well, oligarchs and the despot at the top, they simply, in a skillful way, rob.
Welcome to a world of comfort and service excellence with our new business class suites, where your privacy is paramount and your experience is second to none. And let us take care of everything. Qatar Airways, the airline you can rely on.
Hello, you're watching Impact on BBC World News. It's been a week since a gunman entered an elementary school in Uvalde and killed 19 children and 2 teachers. Grant reports from Uvalde.
There is grief, and then there is the grief of losing a child.
Come on, okay.
Further still, the grief of losing a child in these most awful.
We're drinking and it just affected me really, really bad. Like, she was my best friend, and she looked a lot like me. Like, I would always tell her, like, you know, she's my twin, and she would always smile, and it's just been really...
Pounding her parents' grief is their anger over how the police let the gunman spend more than an hour in the school before they shot him.
I don't understand how, you know, police officers, you know, there's kids screaming, you know, go in there, save those kids.
On Sunday, President Biden came to Uvalde to pay his respects and meet the victims' families. Ryan told him Alithia was an army.
Well, the 3-time Grand Slam champion, Andy Murray, has told the BBC that the recent mass shooting at that school in Uvalde in Texas brought back memories of his own experience surviving the Dunblane massacre in Scotland.
Painful memories of the horrific shootings that took place at his own school in Dunblane in 1996.
It's obviously unbelievably sad and disappointing, and, you know, yeah, it just makes you feel angry and incredibly upset for the parents through these drills, like, as young children, as like 7-8-year-old children, and it's like, how is that normal that children should be having to go through drills, like, in case someone comes into school with a gun? I don't get it.
Other issues.
Points, ATP removing the points from Wimbledon, I don't think it's what the majority of the players wanted, and I'm not quite sure who who it actually benefits, because I think all of the players will still turn up and play, so not sure how beneficial it is.
Has been taking a look at how the Queen's fashion has changed throughout her 70-year reign.
From the grand state occasion to classic country casual to solid royal engagement dressing.
Lots of long lengths, and she also had matching turbans as well. And she wore these outfits to events where she was one of the only women in attendance. You know, she's really had that kind of power on the world stage.
With many British fashion lines and designers.
There's nothing like seeing her using one of our handbags at an event. It gives us great pride in the craftsmanship that we've produced in that bag.
The Queen's coronation dress was perhaps her... In her 90s, where are the Queen's fashion influences now? We'll take a look at London Fashion Week in 2018. The Queen, Vogue editor Anna Wintour, and Angela Kelly, a personal assistant to the Queen. Her look, over 70 years, has been safe, reliable, practical and consistent, much like her reign. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
I'm on Twitter. I'm at
reaching 48 degrees here by the end of the week. Other areas likely to see some showers. Still got some heavy ones in the northeastern states of India and to the south of the country, and it's particularly wet through the Maldives and also into Sri Lanka, and the southwest monsoon continuing to Bangladesh. It looks like it's going to be dry in Dhaka over the coming few days. Still got some storms likely in the far northeast of India, particularly for Myanmar. Temperatures will continue to rise across Pakistan, reaching the mid-40s in Islamabad, likely to see similar sorts of temperatures.
The one with the BBC Sport website and app. With live text commentary, championship standings and race calendar. Go online or download the app now.
East of the country.
This attack happened while the Secretary-General of the United Nations was in Kyiv.
But once again, it's civilians who are the casualties.
There's still no sign that the Kremlin's forces are about to deliver some knockout blow.
See the headlines as they happen with thousands of Ukrainian refugees have fled to the Polish capital, Warsaw. Can the city cope with the influx of new arrivals? Our world. Poland. 3 million refugees and counting. On BBC World News.
But a visit by the Queen and a dance helped to cement it. Stay with us on BBC World News.
In Ukrainian hands, but Ukrainian defenders are still holding on. The Canadian government has introduced tough new gun control legislation, banning the sale of handguns and limiting magazine rifles to 5 rounds. Canada's
as Europe announces a partial embargo on Russia. Ben Boulos, welcome to World Business Report. In just a moment, we'll have the latest economic growth figures from India. But before that, as you've been hearing today, European leaders have agreed on a partial ban on Russian oil, blocking around 2/3 of imports to issues, all of which is worsening Europe's cost of living crisis. So how much worse can it get? Well, joining us to help answer that question, Mark Oswald, Chief Economist and Global Strategist at ADM Investor Services International. Mark, given what we've seen the European...
Well, unfortunately, energy is sort of the lifeblood of everything, including other commodities, the supply of other commodities. So this is going to have a knock-on effect. And the biggest knock-on effect is the fact that isn't going to be coming down in any great hurry. And with energy prices likely to stay high because of this embargo, even if it isn't as perfect as certain people would want from a political standpoint, it certainly does. I mean, I think part of the problem here is what we're dealing with is supply side inflation, i.e. the supply of goods and raw materials, rather than demand side, for which raising interest rates is generally much more.
Governments or international organisations may have to intervene and put some kind of price intervention, some kind of price cap on oil, or would that not be feasible at all?
Well, you can't really cap the price of oil, but you certainly can introduce measure low, about half what it was in the 2017-2021 period compared with 2011-16. You can incentivize that, but the rewards for that are much more longer term, because you can't build all the capacity that you ease some of the burden, but not all of the burden.
Indeed, it is something of an economics Rubik's Cube. Mark, thank you very much for speaking to us. Mark Ostwell there. Well, travellers around the world have faced chaos this week. You may well be...
This is leading to a kind of rebound in interest in travel by plane. And then we haven't even got to the higher cost of jet fuel. But going back to that pilot shortage, I think major airlines are hoping to add 12,000 carrier. You've got Delta Airlines and other big carriers dropping their requirement for a 4-year degree for pilot hiring requirements. So it's a pretty dire situation, and it's not one that you can solve overnight. So travellers are being warned to expect a kind of bumpy headache, as if the pilot shortage wasn't enough. They're grappling with jet fuel, which has doubled in price. And you see the knock-on effect. It's not just a headache for airlines, it's also a headache for those who wish to travel by plane. The most recent inflation compared to a year earlier. So they're passing on costs. And it's interesting when you break it down. Like I said, jet fuel is double what it was in New York City Harbour, where many planes, because it's such a big hub for international flights, refuel.
Let's round up some of the other main business news now. And Israel has signed an historic free trade deal with the United Arab Emirates. It's the first ever it's signed with an Arab country. The deal will see 96% of product hard by rising oil and commodity prices since Russia invaded Ukraine. The Australian gaming operator Crown Resorts has been fined $57 million for illegally accepting Chinese bank cards. Dented investor sentiment, certainly on the continent. You can see the effects of that on the Frankfurt DAX and the Paris CAC. The FTSE 100 benefiting from the jump in the oil price because some of its biggest listed companies are, of course, oil and energy firms.
It's important for us to not only invest in digital,
diversify towards those sectors that we feel both that they have the right potential. If we mention just one for a start, like the agriculture sector, where Angola has 35 million hectares.
This is BBC World News with the latest news and results from around the globe. Sport today.
Prepares for Rafa and Novak. Andy Murray, a survivor of a mass school shooting in Scotland, tells the BBC how he reacted to the tragic events in Uvalde, Texas. And Moroccan side Wydad win the African.
He already won, I think, the last 9 matches in a row, winning in Rome and now winning here in straight sets every match. Probably he will be confident. Just enjoying the fact that I am here.
I'm glad that I, didn't spend too much time on the court myself up to quarterfinals, knowing that, playing him in Roland Garros is always a physical battle along.
The advantage for Nadal is that he only had 5 clay court matches going into Roland Garros because of the rib fracture he suffered at Indian Wells, which forced him to take 4 to 6 weeks off the tour. And he's just not playing quite as well as he would like to. Taken to 5 sets by Felix Auger, a chronic long-term problem that he's managing. And Novak Djokovic is playing so well.
Russell Fuller there. Well, that's to come later on that match, but we already know who the first semi-finalist in the women's side of the draw will be, as Martina Trevisan beat Leila Fernandez. The Italian had too much one in the second, 1-1 in the second set there. After that match, it's the third seed Alexander Zverev against teenage sensation Carlos Alcaraz. Now, staying with tennis, two-time Wimbledon champion Andy Murray has told the BBC the recent mass shooting at a school in America.
Painful memories of the horrific shootings that took place at his own school in Dunblane in 1996.
It's obviously unbelievably sad and disappointing, and it just makes you feel angry and incredibly upset for the pair of 7-8-year-old children. And it's like, how is that normal that children should be having to go through drills in case someone comes into school with a gun? I don't get it.
Other issues on his mind include the fallout from the war in Ukraine and the
about it. I can understand why it's frustrating for them. In terms of the points, ATP removing the points from Wimbledon, I don't think it's what the majority of the players wanted, and I'm not quite sure who actually benefits, because I think all of the players will still turn up.
Blanca, as Moroccan side Wydad won the African Champions League. They beat Al Ahly 2-0 to win the competition for the third time, preventing the Egyptian side from claiming the title for a third straight year. Those are the celebrations on the streets there. The game.
And ideally, the host venue would be announced at the beginning of the competition. So the fact that it was delayed so much, the Egyptian side, Al Ahly, thought that was very unfair. And they felt like some behind-the-scenes dealings were probably made for
fans at the Champions League final between Liverpool and Real Madrid on Saturday. French authorities came in for heavy criticism when they said that widespread ticket fraud and local youths forcing their way through gates were to blame. Liverpool chairman Tom Werner has since written about it from us. A reminder, you can get all the latest sports news, including updates from the French Open with Rafa Nadal up against Novak Djokovic in the quarterfinals of the men's draw. Massive match, that is, on the BBC Sport website at bbc.com/sport. But from me, Gavin Ramjohn, and the rest of the team here on Sport Today was...
हम इस उम्र में ऐसे रहेंगे क्या?
बिल्कुल रहेंगे, अगर पापा जैसी सही प्लानिंग की तो।
जैसे कि?
मेरे पापा ने इन्वेस्ट किया LIC के जीवन अक्षय में, जो दे रहा है इमीडिएट और गारंटीड एन्युटी एट रेगुलर इंटरवल्स, जिंदगी भर के लिए।
वाह, पर हमें तो
What we need most is solutions. Our new website, Future Planet, brings you stories of the people who are working to make the world a sustainable place. And because we're committed to carbon-conscious reporting, we'll work with local reporters from...
to visit the childhood home of a bit of a hero of mine. He was among the 60s biggest sporting stars, so influential that one of the city's airports is actually named after him.
It's wet and it's gloomy.
What a goal! United in the lead! He was a key part of the iconic Manchester United team that in 1968 became the first English side to win the European Cup.
Mr. Vibaker, President of the European Union of Football Associations, handed it over.
Where fans now have the chance to stay at his childhood home.
Hello, you must be Peter.
I am. Welcome to George Best's house. Come on in.
Thank you very much. Wow.
Fame and fortune.
How easy was it to source this kind of furniture?
It just came from a number of sources, local charity shops, antique dealers, etc. So.
The house was bought by a local non-profit group called, now available as a holiday rental.
So all the proceeds that we get from the use of this house are used to support other community projects in East Belfast.
Tourists have come here, and tell me what their reaction has been like.
Oh, the reaction has been fantastic.
This is obviously one of the bedrooms where the family lived in. But not only am I staying in the same house, I'm actually going to be sleeping in the very room that he had as a child. Right, it's time for me to get some sleep. Although I'm not completely tired yet. I need some reading material. And I think this should do the trick.
Hello, this is Impact. I'm Laquesta Burak. A deal at last.
And just hearing gunshots, kids screaming, go in there, save those kids.
And could your cappuccino help keep you alive? Find out why coffee drinkers have a shot. Hello and welcome to the programme. After weeks of discussions, EU leaders have agreed on an immediate
agreed to ban most of the oil they receive from Russia.
This is very important. Thanks to this, Council should now be able to finalise a ban on almost 90% of all Russian oil imports by the end of the year.
The EU's also taking measures against Russia's biggest bank and people accused of war crimes in Ukraine.
It's taken weeks of complicated negotiations for the EU to reach this compromise deal. Earlier sanction pact
embargo will cost Russia billions. With oil prices surging, it will hurt Europe too. In Ukraine, fierce fighting continues, especially in the Donbass region.
On Russian oil being received in Moscow. Well, our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, says the Kremlin will have noticed that it wasn't easy for the EU to agree.
Well, this is a compromise deal with caveats, but it's still a big deal. We'll sell to other markets, we'll sell to Africa, to Asia. And even if Russia has to do that at a discount, it reckons that the high global oil price will help offset those losses. Now, that may be wishful thinking on the part of Moscow. Okay. And one other thing, the Kremlin will have seen how difficult it was for EU member states to sit down and come to an agreement over this oil embargo. The Kremlin knows that there are differences of opinion in Europe on
to go into the details, but indeed, for us in the European Parliament and for me personally, it doesn't go quick enough and far enough.
What would work then? How quickly should you move, and what should it be doing?
Well, for the seaport and see to it that we get that done. I think that is technically and logistically possible. And so far, I'm not happy that we are where we are. But it's, of course, far better than nothing.
To what took place with Hungary, because President Orban has been very, let's say, confident in what he has achieved in Brussels, saying Hungary is exempt. What do you make of what Mr. Orban achieved?
Breaks up the unity, and it is not helpful. And I think the big majority of the Hungarian people are also not happy about such a de facto quite friendly stance towards the Russian.
Longer take Russian pipeline oil. Is that binding, or is it a pledge? Because we know how often pledges never deliver.
Well, we'll see to it. Not only in the European Parliament, but I think also not opens as promised.
OK, well, let us come to Germany, and we'll pick up straight off with what you're saying with those heavy weapons. Does that include the planes that Poland wanted to deliver to Ukraine to support them? What's the position?
Weaponry to be delivered, and it's blocked in the Chancellor's office, and it is outrageous. That is not acceptable. It isolates us, and we are not in line with our major partners, as the Chancellor seems to claim.
Mr. Gahler, what are the reasons given for that block?
And the Czechs, other governments, and I'm pretty unhappy about this attitude of the government, because if something tragic happens to Ukraine, I'm aware who will be blamed.
Say they now control a third of the city of Severodonetsk, which has been reduced to ruins by weeks of artillery bombardment. Earlier, I spoke with Philip Ivlev-York. He's in Kyiv, although he was recently evacuated from...
Mortar explode right next to you, then you might as well kind of not die the next time. So when we heard the sounds of bullets, we just assumed that they were aimed at someone else. But then when we heard one whiz past, I panicked. I didn't realize I was injured at first, and then when I realized I was losing a lot of blood, it was like, well, that's just my personal reaction. I was kind of surprised and offended, I think. It was resentful feeling, I'd say.
So we've just shown our viewers some of the pictures of some of the work that you were doing. You obviously are on the mend. I'm hoping you are recovering well. You had
defending Severodonetsk and that have been defending Severodonetsk for the past months. If what I saw in Severodonetsk is bad, then the actual trenches, which is what the Russians are really aiming for, obviously, are hell, under-equipped. That they were waiting for Western armaments. I think they didn't make it in time. And the stories they told me, I mean, people are just bleeding out, and people panic to probably corner you, creep up on you. So there is no sleep. There is just constant explosions, and all the soldiers could do is just dig. All they're told to do is dig for your lives. Dig trenches, dig deeper.
And parents are expressing their anger at the police response.
भाग दौड़, all the time job, the roaming wala job, the deadline wala job, or are you living in the market wala job?
Life is full of options. Choose a job and earn on your own terms. Choose to become an LIC.
19 children and 2 teachers. So as the small town in Texas prepares for the victims' funerals, the US Justice Department has now opened a review of the police response on the day after officials admitted that mistakes had been made. The parents...
An ordinary school day in Uvalde descended into horror. A week on, her parents, Jess and Ryan, are still struggling to comprehend their loss.
I haven't been able to eat or sleep or drink, and it's just...
This is a parent's nightmare, and this is the worst of the worst.
A talented artist, Alithia's bedroom is full of her awards, especially for drawing. Compounding her parents' grief is their anxious respects and meet the victims' families. Ryan told him Alithia was an artist, and Mr. Biden asked if he could have one of her pictures to hang in the White House.
He did say that whenever we hang it up, we're going to send you a picture where it's hanging, and you're free to see it anytime. There's something special that she put her heart into it, and it's there hanging in the White House.
After the darkest week in its history, Uvalde must now bury its victims. A community heartbroken over the senseless murder of Alithia.
Risk of mortality over a 7-year period than those who didn't, even if, listen to this, they put sugar in it. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Gunther Conley, who is a professor of nutrition and food science.
I'm not sure the study is really that suitable to provide that evidence on the benefit of coffee. So that sounds a bit contradictory. The results are not surprising in the way that we probably suspect that coffee has a beneficial effect on health, of coffee. But there already starts a big problem. No coffee is the same. There's so many different types of coffee, there are different types of beans, but there's also different ways of consuming it. Now, this study was conducted in the UK, where we drink the coffee in usually as filtered what people are. So if you look at the study population, people who don't drink coffee tend to have a slightly higher deprivation. And they might have slight differences in other aspects of their life. I think that depends on what you want from a health point of view. The main compounds in a coffee which we believe have a beneficial effect on health are phenolic compounds or polyphenols, and they're, for example, also in tea. So tea and coffee have phenolic compounds that we can never separate between these factors. So in the UK, where we would say tea is the drink all people do, and it's sort of being different to drink coffee. But then say in the US, coffee is the standard drink and drinking tea is the functioning. So there are so many different aspects in consuming foods that just from an observational study like this one, we can learn a lot. But it's not enough to really conclude we have to do something or we have to change something.
Oh, goodness. I think we've lost the professor. Now, that's a shame. He's probably reaching for his cup of coffee. Anyway, OK, that was Professor Agunta that likes to lunch. Well, head to Dubai, because there is a new cafe there that could get their tail wagging. It's the first place in the Emirate to serve food exclusively for man's best friend.
Hello there. Recent days have seen temperatures hitting 45 degrees in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. And over the next few days, temperatures will rise a little higher in the northwest of India, and eastern Pakistan could be reaching 48 degrees. Much further north into Central Asia, and the showers here are fewer and lighter in the east. It's still a little cooler here, mind you. Looks like it's going to be dry in Afghanistan, plenty of sunshine to come in Pakistan, continuing to heat up a bit, likewise across the northwest of India. More rain to come in the Maldives and widely, I think, in Sri Lanka. And the storms are moving away from Bangladesh. It looks like it's going to be dry in Dhaka over the coming few days. Still got some storms likely in the far northeast of India, particularly for Myanmar. Temperatures will continue.
To get live text updates, news, analysis and the golf calendar, go online or download the app now.
The conflict is coming closer, and a feeling here now that nowhere is safe.
A man who turned to politics just 3 years before was now facing down the world's second most powerful army.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In-depth programming on BBC World News.
After gaining independence from British rule, Ghana led other African countries in joining and remaining in the Commonwealth. The relationship was looking fractious early on, but a visit by the Queen and a dance helped to cement it. Stay with us.
Russia is driving a metals mining boom, but is digging up more of our own backyard really the answer? I'll be talking to a global metals company specialising in the minerals to power our future and the world's biggest trading house to find out. Join me, Aaron Heselhurst, on Talking Business Weekly.
The Canadian government has introduced tough new gun control legislation. It would ban the sale of handguns and limit rifle magazines to 5 rounds. Canada's gun homicide rate is less than a fifth of that in the US. And a study has found that drinking a moderate amount of coffee each day is associated with a lower risk of death. Those are your headlines here on BBC World News.
I've been speaking to Vladimir Putin's man in London, the Russian ambassador Andrei Kelin. We talked about the war in the east, if Russia's leader might use nuclear weapons, and I showed him evidence of alleged Russian war crimes. Start this war.
This is not a war. This is a limited operation. And I have to say the reasoning, which probably is not popular here in media in Great Britain, because you are presenting only one side of years after nationalistic government has come to power in Kiev. They have built a fortress over there, a fortress in which best of Ukrainian forces are now concentrated. And this is a highly fortified area, region.
It's a full-scale war, and there is absolutely no evidence that the Ukrainian forces were launching some kind of huge attack in the Donbas region. That's not there. The evidence isn't there.
Okay. Once again, it is for 8 years via Minsk agreements.
According to the UN Human Rights Commissioner, more civilians have been killed in the conflict since Russia invaded in February than in the last 8 years. Where is the evidence that Russian-speaking Ukrainians were under threat? That evidence isn't there.
No, probably you haven't heard what I have said. How many people have been killed?
I've heard what
How many people have been killed? And I can assure you that it is not our idea to kill civilians. Our militaries, they are targeting only military.
And keep that part of the country?
Our aim, as it has been formulated, is to help now to these republics to survive. But be sure that we are going to assist our professional forces to seize this building one by one after that.
Have you given up on Kyiv? and focusing your war in the east?
It's a good question. None of our...
was there at the time?
Yes, we did have troops, but not for Caesar of Kiev.
So why were they there?
I'm not a military person, I'm a diplomat for 40 years, but even I do understand if you would like to do something, then on one...
Civilians walking away from them.
No,
they're walking away.
If I had, what iPad, I could also. If I had iPad, I would be eager to show you that every day Ukrainian forces are shelling. Conversation. You are showing me something, probably a piece of a film, or a piece of a game, or a joke, or whatever, computer game set, and telling me, let's see what it is.
CCTV footage
Great.
From a building that has been corroborated. Russian troops.
Are we having an interview with you, or you would like to express your ideas? Please.
I have expressed the question, which is that how Russian troops are conducting this war? Before Russian troops entered the town. This photograph here is on the 19th of March, after Russian troops were just after Russian troops were about to leave. And that is the result. Dead.
Find any troops, any bodies on the streets. And there are a lot of evidence of that. After 3 days, someone has come and discovered some bodies. Besides, can you imagine that professional troops, as Russian troops?
The residents, local people who heard the gunshots, and they corroborate each other's story independently. And I went to Yablunska Street, and I spoke to people in the neighboring street, and they heard the gunshots in a nearby school, in a couple of other buildings, and in Yablunska Street, which is where these pictures come from. Sir, again, why is Russia conducting this war in this way, committing war crimes?
Of Bucha, in his initial statement, when it has been freed, has confirmed.
Sir, this is the city of Mariupol, completely devastated.
Don't worry about Mariupol. We have already
Many people are worrying about Mariupol.
Are you going to listen to me, or are you going to talk yourself? If you will continue to talk...
We can see from the pictures, these are residential areas, sir. Residential areas that have been bombed
houses. We have lots of experiences.
Complete devastation, sir. These are residential areas. These are not legitimate military targets. What are you saying?
It might be a result.
It might
speak about.
So the Ukrainian government has decided to completely flatten one of its own cities and leave this kind of devastation.
Mariupol has a long history, and I remember that Mariupol is a part of Donetsk Republic.
Of what is happening, and you won't accept this clear evidence that I've offered today.
I do accept that Mariupol is destroyed by fighting.
But you won't accept that it's the result of Russian...
Possible. I used to work on NATO for many years, and I was explained several times that collateral damage happens all the time if in the conflicts.
That's collateral damage. That's what you think. That could be collateral damage. Okay, I mean, as I say, you won't...
He is very unprofessional. We have, of course, people who think differently. He is one of them, that's all right. But I can say you that 75% of the Russian population do. Yes, he stayed for some time at the ministry. He used to work over there, but he did not have our respect. Not before and not after this statement.
He doesn't have your respect. He doesn't have your respect. I do, sir. I do. It must have taken a lot of courage on his part to say those things.
It is up to him. He has done it, and let it be like that.
Today?
In no way, absolutely.
He's deluded. He's stupid. He just doesn't understand what's going on.
It depends on him and on his motivation. Perhaps he would like to work for UK, so let him do this. To provoke me to something, or
I'm genuinely not here to
discuss
provoke you, sir. I'm genuinely not here to provoke you.
It is not about that.
I'm simply
then
putting
it will be our last
points of view. I'm simply putting other points of view.
We can finish on this point.
I mean, there is this...
Not for a long time at this position, but she is very belligerent. If she would like to continue the war, she will prolongate the conflict, and it is up to her, of course, to make this statement or to make these deeds. But What's the motivation for that? To make Russia more favourable. It's an illusion, as recent 3 months after sanctions has been imposed has shown. Our economy did not. And it's not a big difference, of course, after all these sanctions. What's the use of that? For UK, where is the profit, or where is the benefit of UK?
Well, threats have been made towards the West as a result of Vladimir Putin into the depths of the sea and turn whatever may be left of them into a radioactive desert. Do you believe President Putin would be willing to launch a nuclear attack on Britain?
No. I don't believe that. It is
You say that there will not be a nuclear attack on the UK. Do you believe that there could be the use of a tactical nuclear weapon in the war in Ukraine?
No. Tactical nuclear weapon is what?
You said to me at the beginning of this conversation that the suggestion was that Ukraine was building up its forces to launch an attack in the east.
Yes, and we will deal it with conventional operation, limited conventional operation. Perhaps you have not
see with your own eyes.
If it is, once again, I'm convinced that UK is not interested in the end state or what's going on over there. But it's a small points you would like to take out of the jet. Why you prohibited the television stations like Sputnik, Russian television? They are now prohibited from the space at all. Even the first channel is. Second channel of the Russian television has been put under sanctions in the UK.
Reported on the story.
You have been
and
only for 2 weeks in Kyiv.
You have been here and you have no excuse because you have access to the world's media and how the whole of the rest of the world is reporting this story.
I think it's a couple of weeks ago. Go over there, talk to people. Not only over there, but also in Melitopol. Those who were living under these conditions, those who has seen this Azov battalion and what they are really doing during the Maidan revolution over there.
So we're going back quite a few years. I was there in the last three months, and I've been there since the beginning of the war. What I'm trying to understand, sir, is why you are reluctant.
Welcome to a world of comfort and service excellence with our new business class suites, where your privacy is
One or two tornadoes. Wet and windy weather is pushing into Ontario. Still have the threat of storms from Lake Michigan down to Oklahoma. Ahead of that, a lot of heat and sunshine, but following to the west, it's quite cold air. Could still be a bit more snow to come in the Rockies. The rains in the northeast are for some storms. Northern Germany pushing through Poland into the Baltic states. Could be quite windy here as well and still wet in Scandinavia. Now the rains across Central Africa are really not amounting to much at all. It's a bit drier than normal. As a result, it's quite hot as well across eastern parts of Pakistan and the northwest of India in particular. There will be some rain around elsewhere, mind you, and the southwest monsoon continuing to advance across Kerala and further into Tamil Nadu, perhaps into Karnataka as well. Wednesday sees drier weather though. That's it. Goodbye.
Our global food system is under profound pressure from climate change, population growth, and fractured supply chains. But might these shocks to our system actually be a catalyst for
questions you have about the big stories of the day? Reality check. Get the facts straight.
As a prisoner of war, we hear the story of one Ukrainian soldier about his treatment at the hands of his Russian captors.
I couldn't feed myself because my jaw was broken and I couldn't sit up. But some nurses would taunt me by leaving food down.
After a mass school shooting in Texas, the funerals of the 21 people shot dead start to take place. As the victims are remembered, parents express their fury at the police response.
This is a parent's nightmare. And
When is the best time to exercise? A new study suggests women get greater benefits in the morning, while for men it's the evening. We'll try to work out why. Propaganda agents of Russia. The war has seen hundreds of soldiers captured by Russian forces. Many find themselves as bargaining chips for prisoner of war exchanges. James Waterhouse has been hearing one soldier's story.
Tank aimed at me. I saw a bright flash. I felt the building collapsing.
He survived, but was captured. No one knew whether he was dead or alive until this.
Feed myself because my jaw was broken and I couldn't sit up. But some nurses would taunt me by leaving food down in front of me and say, "Try and eat that, you low-life Ukrainian."
This is Khlib's testimony. We haven't been able to.
Remained was to pray. The war has brought a lot of suffering. A lot of families are waiting for their sons to return. We pray and we suffer.
After 17 days.
Now, after weeks of discussions, EU leaders have agreed on a partial embargo of Russian oil imports. It will affect oil that arrives by sea, around 2/3 of imports, but not pipeline oil, following opposition from Hungary. The plan is expected to affect all of the EU, just the latest view within the last half an hour or so. Let's speak now to Jacques Madison, a member of the European Parliament from Estonia, who joins us live from Brussels. Welcome here to the programme. So what do you...
An economy, but finally I'm pretty afraid that it's not efficient and it's not enough what EU could do.
Tell me more about your fears then, because you said it was a win for Hungary. Do you fear it's also a win
for the Hungarian economy? But at the same time, very many EU countries are blaming only Hungary, but I just would like to remind also for the Germans that the biggest amount of the money to Russia to finance the war against Ukraine for Vladimir Putin, but I think like we should go further with the sanctions, but on the same time with the sanctions we have to go further with the military aid and to give more weapons to Ukraine.
Well, let me ask you about military aid, because do you think, sorry to interrupt you,
that's the most tricky thing for me, because if I can understand the Hungarian point of view for the economical sanctions, what can damage Hungarians itself, on the same time, there should be no problem to at least help the partners and the allies okay with that. And as we know also, all the sanctions are damaging the both sides, the Russian side and also European side. But to end the war with Ukrainian victory, we have to give them as much as possible weapons to really fight.
And has started prosecuting around 80 of them. Ukraine's top prosecutor told a news conference at The Hague following a meeting with a joint investigation team and the ICC investigating war crimes in Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
We have more than sentenced that they have 11.5 years in a prison because they shelled civilian infrastructure in Kharkiv region.
Well, that was the latest from The Hague. Do stay with us here. In the next few minutes, we'll be speaking. Officials admitted mistakes were made. Well, Alicia Ramirez lost her life in the attack. Her parents have been talking to our correspondent, Will Grant.
There is grief, and then there is the grief of losing a child.
Come on.
It's just been really, really hard on me.
How can you move on from that? How can you get over that moment?
This is a parent's nightmare, and this is the worst of the worst. You know, go in there, save those kids.
On Sunday, President Biden came to Uvalde to pay his respects and meet the victims' families. Ryan told him Alicia was an artist, and Mr. Biden asked a community heartbroken over the senseless murder of Alicia, 18 of her classmates and her 2 teachers. Will Grant, BBC News, Uvalde.
Well, let's stay with this because two-time Wimbledon champion.
I was at Dunblane and a teacher, like, you know, coming out and waving all of the children, like, under tables and telling them to go and hide. And it was a kid, like, telling exactly the same story about how she survived it. And they were saying that they...
Andy Murray speaking there to the BBC. Now, do stay with us because here on the programme in the next few minutes we'll speak live to Ukraine's former Minister of Defence. That's next.
आंटी आप ही को मिस कर रहे थे।
अमित कहाँ रह गया बेटे?
आता ही होगा।
सॉरी
सॉरी छोड़ो, गिफ्ट का है?
लाया हो ना, एक बर्थडे गिफ्ट में कई बर्थडे गिफ्ट्स।
वो कैसे?
LIC की धनरेखा पॉलिसी, गारंटीड बेनिफिट्स, मनी बैक।
Welcome back to today's Global on BBC World News. Our main story here, Russian forces now control about half of the...
Donetsk as the one of the few cities left in the Lugansk area which they're trying to occupy. So currently this is their main objective, and they are doing whatever they can in order to go through all civilians to leave, because we passed already Mariupol, which was literally destroyed, like, you know, completely destroyed as a city. Because Russians decided to take it. The government helps, like whoever...
They will have control of Luhansk. Strategically, what will Ukraine then do? Will it seek to protect other areas, or will you be looking at counter-offensives?
We will always be looking at counteroffensives because as soon as we can get more weapons, particularly these are artillery weapons which are being shipped right now from the west, we can go to counteroffensive, and because Russians, as I said, they are applying everything they can in order to...
That decision yesterday from the US not to supply Ukraine with certain rocket systems that could reach as far as Russia, how much of a blow is that?
I don't think it's a blow, to be honest, because we are still talking. We still drill ones which can reach like 70 kilometers. That's still, or 80, 90. It still will do the job, and so we actually do expect them to make a positive decision.
Give me a sense, finally, of where public
is definitely not changing strategy. We are absolutely determined to win. We know that we can. We know that our army is much more efficient and effective than Russians. So the only thing we need is to re-equip ourselves with additional weapons. And
one more story, because it's a fascinating story, before we take a break. A new study has found the best time of day to exercise may be different for men and women. Researchers found women burned more body fat during morning exercise, whereas evenings were more optimal for men.
Kind of body types, they fed them the same kind of foods, quite a controlled diet. And at the end of a 12-week period, they were tested, quite a lot of medical tests, so body fat, metabolic rate, blood pressure, that kind of thing. One of the results, completely unsurprising, to some of the routines in the morning than in the evening, seem to lose more body fat in particular, and in particular around the middle of the waist, which is where you really want to lose it. That's where you don't want to see large amounts of body fat around organs like the heart and the liver, and hormones. So it's probably not one reason, but probably a combination of all those things. And our body is governed by something, or dictated by something called circadian rhythms, and this is what makes your body feel awake in the morning and asleep at night. Now we know that how that they're going to look at in the future. So all of these volunteers were very much into sports, had a big background in working out and that kind of thing. What's really key is, will we see the same results in people that are slightly overweight or obese? Because that's where you can see the real benefits, and that's where you might have dedicated fitness plans for certain individuals so they can lose as much weight as possible.
What time do you exercise?
Oh, you're lucky if I exercise at all at the moment.
That is the wrong answer, Jim. Jim Reid, thanks very much for taking us through all of that. Now, do...
Hello there. Recent days have seen temperatures hitting 45 degrees in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. And over the next few days, temperatures will rise a little higher in the northwest of India, and eastern Pakistan could be reaching 48 degrees. Still a little cooler here, mind you. Looks like it's going to be dry in Afghanistan. Plenty of sunshine to come in Pakistan, continuing to heat up a bit. Likewise across the northwest of India. We do have some showers, though, likely in Karnataka, but particularly wet, I think, in all sorts of temperatures for a while, I think, in Delhi. Most of the rain is in the far south, Maldives, Sri Lanka, southern parts of India, heading its way a little further north.
This is a residential...
Ukraine. In-depth programming on BBC World News.
BBC experts check the facts behind the stories making the headlines. Go to the BBC News website and app to answer any questions you have about the big stories of the day.
This is all part of the same story.
Piece the story together with Ros Atkins, Outside Source on BBC World News.
This is BBC World News. I'm Matthew Amreliwala. On today's Global Wrap, we speak live to our terrorist correspondent in Paris.
One of the great battles of the war. First one was Russia's failure to capture Kiev, and now it looks as though they are actually capturing Severodonetsk. There's a chance then they can start another one of these epic defences, as with Mariupol. So it's definitely Ukrainian forces on the back foot, but
on the ground, just talking to the National Guard captain inside of that city, saying there are too many Russians, but we are holding out for now. But it appears to be only a matter of time, really.
I think so. And it is different from Mariupol. In Mariupol, but the forces, the Ukrainian forces in Severodonetsk, do have a route out, and so I don't think it's going to end up in the same way. But you have to remember there are 12,000.
Now shifting to food security, I mean, how difficult is that issue going to be to navigate, do you think?
I don't think it'll be as difficult as the issue of the oil and gas, simply because it pleases anybody. Of course, that has infuriated the Ukrainians, who say we want, just simply cutting off all 90% of Russian oil.
A gap of over 50 days between the 5th and 6th packages is, quote, unacceptable. So exactly the frustration you were talking about. But interesting also reports on the ground around food that Russia
up in a court of law. It's only a little bit at the moment. I mean, Mariupol, the sheet metal, it's extraordinary that they can still actually get supplies of sheet metal out of a city which was so bomb-torn, as long as Ukraine is prepared to demine the coastal waters. Well, I'm sure that Ukraine would be prepared to do that in order to get those supplies out and to get some sort of income from
further.
Just to answer that, in the first instance, Lavrov, the foreign minister, said that liberating, he said, Donbass would be an unconditional priority. By from that, then I don't think we're going to get anywhere.
John, thanks very much for taking us through all of that. John Simpson, our World Affairs editor, on the latest there from Ukraine. We'll have business in a moment, but I just want to end 19 children killed, 2 teachers, and those funerals happening today in the town. Irma Garcia, one of the teachers, that funeral is happening around about now. So that news coming from Washington, that President Biden says he plans
on the Indian economy. Economic growth there slowed to 4.1% for the first quarter of the year. That is the slowest pace it's seen for a year. It's also being attributed to the impact of the Omicron COVID wave, as well as the rising price of
the raw materials and manufacturing processes have gone up too. This has drained profits for small factories like this one in Mumbai's suburbs. It meant making hard choices. They had to cut jobs and limit production.
This, coupled with rising prices of everyday goods, has affected people's ability to spend.
India's consumption-driven economy is caught in a bind. Manufacturing is struggling. Services like travel and tourism are still recovering.
Hands on the anvil to try and kickstart investments into this country, right? So the government has set aside a lot more money than before on capital expenditure, roads, railways, ports, power, and so on and so forth. So that's one good
Thousands of flights have been cancelled or delayed amid public holidays in the US and the UK. Demand for travel has jumped since pandemic restrictions were eased, but airlines are struggling to keep up due to staff shortages. Let's find out more about this now from our really struggling as things stand. And yes, there are holidays in the UK and the US, but we're not even into the peak summer holiday season in the Northern Hemisphere. How are they going to cope when that hits?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, as an industry, the major players here are planning to hire as many as 12,000 pilots this year. In part, what happened was during the pandemic, you saw more people retire early. There was a slowdown in training, and all of this has sort of...
I was going to ask you about that, Michelle. What impact is that going to have? We've seen the price of oil spike. Presumably, that's going to have a knock-on effect for the airlines and the fuel they have to buy.
Well, so compared to a year ago, the price of jet fuel has doubled. It is even worse. You've got President Biden this week laying out his plans to fight inflation, meeting today with the Fed chair. But obviously this is feeding into problems we're seeing in the broader economy. And I think for those who want to travel, whether it's here in America or elsewhere around the world.
Gas flows to Denmark's Ørsted. Ørsted said the move would not immediately put Denmark's gas supplies at risk. It's also stopping supply to Shell Energy for its contract to supply gas to Germany, effective from June the 1st. Gazprom says both...
Now, the murdered Indian singer and politician Sindhu Moosewala was hit by 24 bullets, according to health officials who've spoken to the BBC. Thousands of fans gathered outside his village home to pay their respects ahead of his funeral, after his security was trimmed by the state government, and the murder has led to a political storm sparking massive outrage from fans and opposition leaders. Now, still to come on today's programme, ahead of...
On the Belarusian side, migrants started throwing rocks and bricks and branches towards...
The sound of shooting and explosions.
This is a storm that has now claimed at least 14 lives overnight. You had people rushing to their basements.
We break stories from more places than any other international news broadcaster. We are the leaders.
Names talk, they talk to the BBC.
Reasons. Novak Djokovic is not sure to be able to play in the US Open in September because you need proof of COVID vaccination, or in the Australian Open next January because after what happened this year, he's not actually allowed to return to the country for a further 5 years. So we savour the French Open also without dropping a set. Nadal had a nasty flare-up of this long-term congenital foot problem when he played in Rome. He seems to be managing it quite well, but he wasn't at his best and was taken to 5 sets in the previous round by Felix Auger-Aliassime, rightly say, to Djokovic in the head-to-head record. But here at Roland Garros, it's 7-2 in Nadal's favour. Now, Djokovic has had recent success, including last year when he beat him in 4 sets in the semi-finals, despite finding himself 5-love down in the opening set to Djokovic. But let's not write Nadal off because of his record here. He's lost only 3 times at Roland Garros in his entire career.
That's an incredible statistic. Russell, a final thought then. Whoever wins this, do you think that... Time to take your seat. Thanks so much for talking to us live there from Paris. Good to talk to you. Now, shortly after accession to the throne, Queen Elizabeth was faced with a fast-changing empire as colonies in Africa gained a royal dance with the country's first president, helped to cement relations and set a precedent for other African countries.
A controversial visit that became historic. Accra in November 1961. She made history. A dance with the man who replaced her as head of state of Ghana was hugely symbolic. A queen well ahead of her time. But back home, not everyone was ready to embrace the message.
I think the atmosphere that has sustained the Commonwealth would ever have happened. I think it was critical for the survival of the Commonwealth that that visit was such a roaring success.
Across generations through the Akosombo Dam, the main source of power for Ghana and her neighbours. It was the centerpiece of President Nkuruma's economic plan. The Queen helped find the funding to build it. And
taken the EU to bring in the next raft of sanctions. So that interview live on Global here in just a minute or two.
यार अजय
पर इंटरवल्स जिंदगी भर के लिए।
वाह, पर हमें तो इस एज तक वेट करना पड़ेगा ना।
बिल्कुल नहीं, हमने तो अभी इन्वेस्ट किया है LIC के न्यू जीवन शांति में, जो हमें देगा डिफर्ड एन्युइटी, मतलब कुछ साल बाद से रेगुलर इनकम।
I see.
Rain is set to continue, and we still have the risk of some flooding and some mudslides. And then the remnants of that old hurricane could emerge off the Yucatan Peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico and develop a circulation. Now, at the moment, there's a 50% chance of a tropical storm forming. And if that does develop, it could head its way into Florida this weekend and be the first named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season. Now, into tornado touching down on Monday, causing damage. Reports of 5 tornadoes in the upper Midwest on Monday. There's still the risk of some tornadoes at the moment coming from that area of cloud there, but the main driving area of low pressure, that risk is reducing. We've still got some heat in the southeast. Cooler air is coming down from the northwest. That's arriving in the southern high plains, so the risk of wildfires here is reduced. Now elsewhere, we've got some heat building in Europe, particularly through the and across more of Tamil Nadu. In the north, though, the heat building ahead of that monsoon. Goodbye.
After gaining independence from British rule, Ghana led other African countries in joining and remaining in the...
Was in Kyiv.
But once again, it's civilians who are the casualties.
There's still no sign that the Kremlin's forces are about to deliver some knockout blow.
See the headlines as they happen with breaking news alerts in the app and get the full story with bbc.com.
This is...
And say, try and eat that, you low-life Ukrainian.
Also on today's programme, 1 week after a mass school shooting in Texas, the funerals of the 21 people shot dead start to take place. As the victim...
There's always talk about it being something political, but I don't see how it is.
And when is the best time to exercise? A new study suggests women get greater benefits in the morning, while for men, the governor says they've stopped counting the casualties. Meanwhile, Ukraine says it's identified more than 600 Russian war crime suspects and has started prosecuting around 80 of them. The list includes top military, politicians and what Ukraine's Prosecutor General called for prisoner of war exchanges. James Wardhouse has been hearing one soldier's story.
Metal scaffolding, holding together Klib's broken pelvis, jaw, and lost vision in one eye. Klib is only just taking his first steps. 2 months ago, he was defending Mariupol with the Marines, watching for... No one knew whether he was dead or alive until this video was posted online by his captors. He was taken to a hospital in Russian-occupied territory.
They held a dagger on my leg.
Independently verify his claims.
We were lying there without any painkillers or anything. So only my faith and the understanding that I had to survive helped me to carry on.
I knew there were only 2 ways out of Mariupol: death or captivity. All that remained was to pray. The war has brought a lot of suffering, a lot of...
That report from James Waterhouse. Now let's head live to Kyiv. Let's talk to Alexander Rodniatsky, an economic advisor to Ukraine's President Zelensky. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. I want to talk about food security first of all, because your foreign minister talking about working on an international UN-led operation with navies of third countries to ensure safe trading routes. What is the latest that you're hearing as as the best way forward?
I'm willing to do that. It's using the blockade as a weapon, as an economic weapon, as a weapon of war. And it's saying remove the sanctions, and then they're willing to perhaps consider deblocking the sea. So that's what it is. If the West can step in and somehow re-establish or establish new routes out of Ukraine via land or rail that would then substitute for what we used to have via sea.
Russia also saying that Ukraine needs to demine those Black Sea areas. Your response to that?
That's the typical tactic. I mean, they're just plundering Ukraine everywhere they can get an opportunity to do that. When it comes to their own accusations of Ukraine, putting mines out there, that's just, again, usual deceptive tactics on the part of. That is disappointing to us, of course. We're hoping for those rocket launching systems that we're still waiting for to really turn the tide in the Donbass. Those are the types of systems that we desperately need to really push back the Russian forces.
We're waiting for these weapons to turn the tide, and you're disappointed. Because of that decision, does it make holding the Donbass harder for Ukrainian forces? Is that the realistic endpoint of that decision out of Washington?
In advance will continue step by step, maybe slowly, but we see their troops adapting. They've learned from the blunders that they had in the first few months. They're now trying to economize on their losses. They're trying to save their people, as perverse as that sounds for them. And
answered that question about the decision from Washington. You've also had, in the last 24 hours, the watering down of the oil embargo from the EU. Are you concerned at all that the resolve in Western capitals is beginning?
Those pipelines are still functioning. And there's an open question why Germany is still importing oil through those pipelines, through the Druzhba pipeline that has a northern branch. The southern branch goes to Hungary, and that was the whole issue apparently. But the northern branch goes to Germany, and it's still operating.
Or, in your view, do they represent a risk if Ukraine's voice is not being heard within that conversation?
Well, I think Ukraine's voice is being heard. We're obviously hoping that, or partnering them, that if pressure is not going to rise on Russia fast enough, this war will drag on, and there will be more casualties, there will be more disasters economically for Europe, and that's why we need to act now.
A really brief question about your strategy if you lose.
That by the time that they plan to do it, hopefully we will have turned the tide.
We will end it there, but thank you so much for joining us live there from Kyiv with the very latest. Alexander Rodnyatsky, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Khan warned against sacrificing the rule of law for short-term interests, saying defending it was essential for peace and security throughout the world. Anna Holligan sent us this update from The Hague.
The joint investigation team is working together to gather forensic techniques among the member states. He also talked about the importance of the ICC's presence in the region, which is why they are working on setting up an office in the capital, Kiev. But he said basic human standards in the 21st century.
Now to the US. President Biden says admitted mistakes were made. Alicia Ramirez lost her life in the attack. Her parents have been talking to our correspondent, Will Grant.
There is grief, and then there is the grief of losing a child. Horror. A week on, her parents, Jess and Ryan, are still struggling to comprehend their loss.
I haven't been able to eat or sleep or drink, and it's just affecting me really, really bad. She's my best.
This is the worst of the worst.
A talented artist, Alicia's bedroom is full of her awards, especially for drawing. Compounding her parents' grief is their anger over how the police let the gunman spend more than enough one of her pictures to hang in the White House.
He did say that whenever we hang it up, we're going to send you a picture where it's hanging, and you're free to see it anytime. There's something special.
18 of her classmates and her 2 teachers. Will Grant, BBC News, Uvalde.
Well, the tennis star Andy Murray grew up in Dunblane in Scotland and was a student at the town's elementary school when...
The parents, and I heard something on the radio the other day, and it was a child from that school, and I experienced a similar thing when I was at Dunblane, and a teacher, like, you know, coming out and waving all of the children. You know, I get over there, like, there's always talk about it being something political, but I don't see how it is. Like, I don't think anyone wants to see things like that happening, and my feeling is that, like,
do stay with us on Global, because we'll have a new report, a study telling us when is the best time to exercise, the best time for men and women. It is not the same, and that story is next.
9 to 5 job, अरे 5 to 9 job, भाग दौड़ all the time job. The roaming wala job, the deadline wala job, or are you living in the market wala job?
Life is full of
the EU's latest round of sanctions, but making the point that the gap between the fifth round of sanctions and the sixth round of sanctions was 50 days, and he said that was unacceptable. But what is the view in terms of that?
$100 a year in lost export revenue. Now, Moscow's position on this is, well, it's a big world out there, isn't it? We'll sell to other markets. We'll sell to Africa, to Asia. And even if Russia has to do that at a discount, it reckons anti-Western rhetoric he's been coming out with in recent weeks. President Putin will be saying to himself, OK, Europe, citizens of Europe, you're already experiencing a degree of economic pain. Expect more of that now as a result of this oil embargo.
Let's turn to an intriguing story, a fascinating story, because a new study has found the best time of day to exercise may be different for men and for women. Researchers found women burned more body fat during morning exercise, whereas evenings were more optimal
to 8:30 at night. Try to match them as closely as possible. So same kind of body types, they fed them the same kind of foods, quite a controlled diet. And at the end of a 12-week period, they were tested quite a lot of medical tests, so body fat, metabolic rate, blood pressure. But the other result, which you hinted at in the introduction there, actually seemed to show that women seem to respond more effectively to some of the routines in the morning than in the evening, seem to lose more body fat in particular, and in particular around the middle of circadian rhythms. And this is what makes your body feel awake in the morning and asleep at night. Now, we know that how that affects whether you're alert or not. What we're not quite sure about is how it might affect things like exercise and the impact on the body, which is why this is so overweight or obese, because that's where you can see the real benefits, and that's where you might have dedicated fitness plans for certain individuals so they can lose as much weight as possible.
Jim Reed and all those couch potatoes laughing in my ear in the gallery as they listen to that. We're back.
Hello there. Recent days have seen temperatures hitting 45 degrees in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. And over the next few days, temperatures will rise a little higher in the northwest of Afghanistan. Plenty of sunshine to come in Pakistan, continuing to heat up a bit. Likewise across the northwest of India. We do have some showers, though, likely in Karnataka, but particularly wet, I think, in Kerala. More rain to come in the Maldives and widely, I think, in Sri Lanka. Maldives, Sri Lanka, southern parts of India, heading its way a little further north.
Get courtside at the tennis with the BBC Sport website and app.
Amul butter.
Can be sad. They kind of became absurd, and in that, my painting actually became a little bit absurd. Like painting the word sad, or letting oil paint run down the page like tears. But then when you pair it years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, but they're also kind of felt by somebody on social media today.
Cutting off Russia is driving a metals mining boom, but is digging up more.
This is BBC World News. Our main headlines here. Russian forces are said to have taken control of about half of Severodonetsk, the last major city in the Luhansk region, still in sheet metal, are believed to be on board and heading to Russia. It's not known if the Russians legally own the material. And 1 week after the school shooting in Texas, tennis star Andy Murray, who survived the Dunblane massacre as a child, has called for changes to America's
tech to revolutionise business and personal life. It's Click.
Woo! This station is Paddington, where this train terminates. All change, please. All change. I've always wanted to do that.
The roars of the crowds cheering on the athletes.
Time flies. And when you plan a site like this, indeed when you spend all of that money, it's important to plan a legacy, how the place can be put to good use once the games are finished.
And the park is
in 12.5 seconds while jumping over stuff.
And her career still took more twists and turns after that. With injuries, a remarkable return after her pregnancy to win at the World Championships, and then taking silver in Brazil.
It's also connected to women's health, specifically menstruation.
Periods aren't something that's always openly talked about and discussed even less in relation to exercise. But Jessica's new app hopes to help women work out better around their cycle.
Also very aware that I've just started my period. I just rushed off the track and felt that I just didn't absorb that amazing gold medal moment.
Jess Ennis-Hill was at the top of her sport, Olympic.
Conversation about how I felt and how it was making me feel when I trained.
But it's not just athletes that this affects. That's because we have different hormone levels at different times of the month. Our menstruation cycle is split into 4 different phases. They are period, follicular, luteal, and premenstrual. Exercise. Well, the team at Genis think so, and it's something their users are keen to know more about.
As a 45-year-old woman, I knew very little about the way my body works, and I decided to learn.
Moving forward, not only do we need to increase the kind of quantity of research we're getting, but we also need to make it better so we can get to those more sort of accurate conclusions on female physiology.
There are a lot of more popular apps available, like Fitter Woman,
Imagine Jessica Ennis-Hill being even faster. Of course, from smarter fertility tools to totally new devices, in the last decade we've seen even more technology aimed at women's health. But the vast majority of medical testing...
sick, but actually I might be ovulating, pregnant, or having hot flushes in perimenopause.
With 12 million monthly active users, the Clue cycle tracking app holds one of the biggest data sets of its kind. What sort of insight?
Set up with air pollution data. Take an occurrence like the California wildfires. This can help us draw conclusions like the impact of pollution on fertility, for example.
Wow, that's fascinating. I would never have expected that to be a factor. Natural cycle.
Early 2020, because we saw an increased number of temperatures being excluded by the algorithm. The future of healthcare is really to get early insights and have preventative measures rather than get sick and get treatment. It's good to be aware of that no product is ever truly free, so that company has to monetize either by running ads or selling your data to a third party.
And today, as abortion legislation comes under scrutiny in the US,
you collect the saliva, I fold it over, and then I put it in my little inner reader.
Amelia chose Inne after having her contraceptive device removed.
It's very easy for me. In the beginning I had a few...
And some might not like trashing used swabs each day. But if one solution isn't perfect, users can always pick and choose.
Combining the fertility and cycle tracking app Clue makes me feel more secure.
I'm on cool.
You may have seen Casey Neistat touring first-class cabins in the clouds, hanging from helicopters in Hollywood, or snowboarding the streets of New York City. He's had his own TV series, acted in movies, founded and invested in tech companies, and is now turning his talents to feature-length documentaries. I sat down with the viral star, virtually, of course.
Hello, how are you doing, Casey?
I'm just happy that we all have our glasses on. The movie at large is sort of speed bumps when there are no filters between this young 20-something man who has this tremendous audience of tens of millions of subscribers and billions with a B, billions of views with sort of, I don't know, has been seen before. The things that led to his success were very much so the same things that led to his undoing.
In the film, David's skyrocket to fame stalls when a member of his so-called vlog squad, Dirty Dom, is accused.
That accountability did not yield the sort of consequence that certainly the journalist and the survivor herself had anticipated. To me, that is such sort of a bleak outcome.
Estimated $25 million.
We're officially live in the App Store. We've seen such tremendous outcomes because of the opportunities created with technology. But there's a downside to that. There are real negative outcomes. There are real dangers.
London is vast. That purple circle up there means that this place is one of the new stops on a new train line that crosses London.
Originally called Crossrail, work started on it in 2009, but it's since been renamed.
Operating as a single line next year, it will be a 73-mile railway carrying an estimated 500,000 passengers a day. In the core section of the line running underneath London, the £1 billion fleet of trains are almost run faster and much closer together than if driven manually, allowing an increased service frequency.
We're running 12 trains an hour. And the reason we can drive the train go a lot faster is because the computer controlling it is maintaining the.
Now, it's been a bumpy ride to get to this point. When construction began way back in 2009, it was Europe's biggest infrastructure project. But it was beset by problems and has opened 3.5 years late and 4 it looks from the other side.
This is where the magic happens. This is where all the magic happens.
As is often the case, technology also requires a human helping hand.
You're currently shown as not cabbed on. You do have a route set ahead of your train. Is there an issue with your unit? I'm going to cancel your route.
There's the real benefit of having someone that's actually skilled and able to deal with problems here, as well as having this kind of technology.
Yeah, 100. Yeah.
This is really the first step to going to digital railways, to be honest. I think the future is something
to see the human element completely disappear from our railways.
This station is Paddington, where this train terminates. All change, please. All change.
I've always wanted to do that.
Oh, you'd have loved that.
I so would have done. I'm so jealous.
They're also unique. So you know how in some parts of the world dogs are microchipped in case someone loses their dog?
Yes.
Well, here's another idea. Chris Fox has been to Norway to find out about it.
Until now, the usual way we identify dogs is with microchipping. In some countries, it's even the law. But a company from South Korea has developed an app that can identify dogs a little less invasively. All right then, you're up!
It turns out it's actually quite hard to get huskies to sit still for any length of time, especially when you're trying to scan their nose.
Show me your nose.
It takes the phone a few seconds to take pictures of the dog's nose and
reported as missing, and it's telling me where she was reported missing, and I can share my location with the owner so they can be reunited.
Obviously, Emma is not really a lost dog. The huskies had been logged in the app so we could Back at base, I spoke to Pet Now to find out why they'd settled on nose prints for dog recognition.
There may be paws or ear or iris, but some dogs really hate showing. Vet bills are not standardized in South Korea, and some owners are simply not willing to pay the high bills when their dogs or cats become really sick. Some of them choose to.
Hopes its app will become mandatory in South Korea to help reduce the number of dogs that are abandoned by pet owners when a big vet's bill arrives. To do that, they'll need the backing of government and a huge marketing push so that everybody, including people who don't own a
could emerge off the Yucatan Peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico and develop a circulation. Now, at the moment, there's a 50% chance of a tropical storm forming. And if that does develop, it could head its way into Florida this weekend. And along this zone, there's still the risk of some severe storms, perhaps 1 or 2 tornadoes, but that risk is reducing. We've still got some heat in the southeast. Cooler air is coming down from the northwest. That's arriving in the southern high plains, so the risk of wildfires. And again, we've got some wet weather, perhaps windy weather across Scandinavia and the Baltic states as well. And we've got some wet weather across southern parts of India. The southwest monsoon advancing across the whole of Kerala, perhaps into Karnataka and across more of Tamil Nadu.
Now, join us as we explore a world changed by new restrictions.
But there's still so much to discover and enjoy.
Let us be your inside guide to a world of travel.
And hopefully give you some insight